that he was open to negotiations and looking for a way to end the conflict, not because the Russians are losing, that's absurd, but because he knows how destructive and pointless the war is, and he has no wish to continue it.
I was moved by a statement by the retired German general and former chair of the NATO Military Committee, saying that Putin has no intention whatsoever to conquer Ukraine, notwithstanding what Mrs. Newland, what the President Biden, what Tony Blinken have said. And it made me wonder, do your colleagues, retired senior military people in Western Europe, have this general sober view that you do? Or do they have the maniacal view of the American neocons?
I would tell you that many do share what you call a maniacal view for the same reasons that you have many retired 4-stars and senior officers in the U.S. Armed Forces express similar views because they're on the payroll. They're paid handsomely by forces, by entities, institutions, and the media, in their governments, that are ultimately beholden to this ideological coterie of the ruling class. These are what I call Western oligarchs, billionaires who are essentially buying political support, buying up retired officers and paying them to say what they say. You're not going to hear anybody like Petraeus or Keane or the rest of these people stand up and suddenly start telling the truth. That's not what they're being paid to do.
So this retired...
say, Russia's going to lose.
This retired general, 4-star, whose words motivated me, he's an outlier.
Very much so, yeah.
Well, you agree with him, obviously. I mean, look at what President Putin said to Tucker Carlson. Look at everything else he said. There's no indication whatsoever that he wants to, I'll use Joe Biden's phrase, take Ukraine.
Well, remember, the idea behind this entire proxy war was that Russia is weak, it can't withstand us, we can disrupt it, and we can ultimately pull down the Putin regime because the population doesn't support it. These are the fundamental assumptions, all of which were false. They can't back away from those assumptions. And unfortunately, we're stuck with the outcome, which, as you see, is the very opposite of everything they said. Anybody with any sense who looked at it objectively would have reached the same conclusion. But these people that we're discussing, I don't know what the right phrase is to describe them, this ruling class that dominates Western Europe and the United States, is very similar. They're all ideologically committed to something that, however false, however wrong, must be upheld and maintained to the bitter end.
Switching over to Israel and Gaza. Earlier today, hundreds of Gazans were online to receive flour and water from an aid truck, and more than 100 were mowed down by the IDF. Another example, in my view, of the barbarity with which Prime Minister Netanyahu and his folks have conducted this horrific ethnic cleansing in Gaza. What will it take for a state actor to enter with force of arms to stop this?
Well, what you just described is ultimately required. But one of the key assumptions underpinning Israeli operations from the very beginning was that, first of all, from the Israeli standpoint, anything you do against the Arabs is justified because, after all, they are animals, exactly as Prime Minister Netanyahu described them. That's the first underlying assumption. Anything you do is justified. Therefore, it's not a war crime. You are doing something.
Bart is ondernemer en wil een professionele website bouwen zodat klanten...
Of the Israeli people and the Israeli cause. Secondly, the assumption was that the Arab states are too weak. They're essentially burdened with enormous domestic problems. Egypt has 100 million people living on an infrastructure for perhaps 40 million. They have to be fed, they have to eat, they have to live, there has to be some measure of order. They can't risk a war. Jordan is not as populous, but it too has internal contradictions, doesn't want to risk a war. Therefore, pretty much whatever you want to do, you can do, because the rest of the peninsular Arabs who are very wealthy and living well, they're not going to put anything at risk to help their brother Muslim and Christian Arabs up in a place like Gaza or on the West Bank. Then finally, you have the buildup of Israeli forces on the border with southern Lebanon right now. And I suspect that if they grant some sort of temporary ceasefire, because it will be temporary if they get it in Gaza, they will try to exploit that temporary.
Start with the important stuff. Don't forget, everybody, go to ScottRitterExtra.com. That's ScottRitterExtra.com, where you can find all of Scott's work. While you're there, don't forget, he's got a mean old maverick there who's running around barking, looking kind of hungry on a daily basis. So, he's doing a lot of great work. He's doing documentaries, all kinds of stuff, man. That requires a lot of putting a lot of time, traveling, you name it. So make sure that when you go to ScottRitterExtra.com, that you take the time out to throw a few hits to the old man's hat, as they say, to make sure you donate to ScottRitterExtra.com. Also, you can see everything we're talking about here. In case they throw me off, you can go of YouTube. Make sure you follow me on Rumble. I am on Rumble, streaming live on Rumble, so follow me there in case I get thrown off YouTube. Rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. Rockfin is free. Anybody can join it. However, Rockfin stays on the air because they don't have advertising. So if you can't afford to become a member, become a monthly member of Rockfin. If you can't afford it, you can just become a regular member and you don't have to subscribe. Okay, all of that stuff's out of the way. Let's start here. It sounds callous. This really sounds callous. But it seems to me that the way the neocons think is kind of like this. We're running out of Ukraine. Almost like they're a commodity because they see them as cannon fodder. It's really horrific. So they're kind of like, well, we're running out of Ukrainians. Along comes Napoleon Macron, I guess he wants to go after what Napoleon calls the barbarians from the north or something. With what? We used to have an old saying, you saw this on the schoolyard or something. Somebody picks you up and they say, you and who's army, right? But that's the question for Napoleon Macron. You and who's army? The only army that they had has been torn to shreds by the barbarians from the north, and now he's like proposing something that it seems like the rest of Europe is wise enough to say, yeah, this ain't a good idea. Time, fill us in on that whole scenario.
Well, I mean, you're asking to get into the mind of Macron, and that's a scary proposition. First of all, maybe impossible task. I think, given the immediate and visceral rejection of Macron's conceptual proposition of basically, he wasn't saying NATO is interested in being involved. And what he was saying is that individual nations like France would sign security guarantees, security agreements with Ukraine that would allow their forces on a unilateral basis to deploy to Ukraine, not in a combat role, but in a supporting role that would free up Ukrainian forces that are currently involved in, for instance, screening Belarus, screening Transnistria, providing rear area support. The whole notion is that Ukraine needs manpower right now. There's an emergency need for manpower. And there's, I think right now there's several thousand Ukrainian soldiers in the training pipeline in Europe. And when they get trained, and again, these aren't big numbers. We're talking, a few thousand, 5,000. When they finish, there's nothing else for them because there's no funding for it. There's no way to support it. So that's it. 5,000 is one brigade. loses a brigade in 3 days. So it's what they're looking for is immediate availability of over a dozen brigades of trained troops, not people thumped on the head, dragged in for 8 days of training, thrown to the front lines as individual ready replacement. We're talking about already existing units, some of which would be of relatively high caliber. These are units that have been held in reserve and haven't been ravaged by combat. These are the units, for instance, facing off against Belarus in the north, the units that are involved in defensive preparations around Kiev and in Sumy and elsewhere. It reflects the dire situation of the Ukrainian military. They need men right now, as we speak. They're collapsing. The thing we were talking about, Garland, is happening. We see the Russians, they've already penetrated. When the Ukrainians withdrew from Avdiivka, they fell back on new defensive positions that had been hastily dug. Russia has penetrated.
Remind your Ukrainian audience of the following. Remind your Ukrainian audience of the following. Remind your Ukrainian audience of the following. Remind your Ukrainian audience of the following.
Тогда позволь, пожалуйста, Скотту напомнить своей украинской аудитории.
Remind your Ukrainian audience of the following.
Тогда позволь, пожалуйста, Скотту напомнить. Тогда позволь, пожалуйста. Тогда позволь, пожалуйста. Тогда позволь, пожалуйста. Скотту напомнить своей украинской аудитории о следующем. Да.
In May of 2020,
Украинская аудитория о следующем. Да.
in May of 2022,
В мае 22 года
$48 billion,
вам дали $48 миллиардов.
unlimited ammunition,
И вообще неограниченное количество снарядов. Тренировали ваши войска, все умерли.
in the fall of 2020, we gave you millions of
Еще $1 миллиард
Ukrainian audience of the remind your Ukrainian audience of the following. Remind your Ukrainian audience of the Ukrainian audience of the following.
Тогда позволь, пожалуйста, Скотту напомнить своей украинской аудитории о следующем. Да.
In May of 2022,
В мае 22 года
we gave you $48 billion,
вам дали $48 миллиардов.
unlimited ammunition.
И вообще неограниченное количество снарядов.
We trained your troops,
Тренировали ваши войска,
and you all died.
а вы все умерли.
In the fall of 2022, we gave you millions of dollars,
Еще $1 миллиард были даны вам снова.
hundreds of tanks,
Сотни танков,
hundreds of armored fighting vehicles,
сотни бронемашин,
1,000 artillery pieces,
тысячи единиц артиллерии,
millions of artillery rounds.
миллионы снарядов артиллерийских.
We trained nearly 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers.
Более чем 100 тысяч украинских военных были тренированы у нас.
And they all died.
И все умерли.
So what do you want? You want more American money? You want more American weapons? You want more Ukrainian soldiers to die? Because that's the only outcome you're going to get. You will never win this war. There's no chance of you ever winning this war. All that can happen is that this war can be extended in time so that hundreds of thousands of more Ukrainian soldiers die, tens of millions of more Ukrainian people suffer. That's the reality. You cannot win this war. There is no chance of winning this war. Every day you fight this war, Ukraine gets weaker. Every day this war goes on, Russia gets stronger. And the West doesn't care about you. I don't know how many times I have to say this. We just don't care. You don't matter. One dead Russian political opposition leader got more attention and more sympathy in the West than 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers. Understand that. You don't matter. You don't count. You're a tool that has lost its usefulness. We're throwing you to the side. If you want to die more, please, that's your
There's
option.
nothing to
But that's
laugh
all
at.
you're
But
going
one
to
of the
get.
viewers, Colonel, just wrote in and said, I'd like to hear Colonel McGregor conduct one of these interviews in a Scottish
Что вы хотите?
robe.
Чтобы вам дали еще денег, чтобы вам дали еще оружие, чтобы еще больше ваших солдат не тренировали, они все
Asking the wrong man. I couldn't. Well, by the way, Brooke is Irish.
еще
If
100
they say
тысяч ваших
Scottish,
солдат,
they mean
еще
firm.
десяткам
Oh,
миллионов
burn.
украинцев, это
Okay.
принесет еще
Actually, he
больше
didn't
горя.
say
Вы
broke,
не
he
можете
said
победить
Scottish
в этой войне.
accent.
Никаким образом. Сколько вам денег и
Incorrectly
оружия не
called
давали.
it
Все,
broke,
что
but thank you
произойдет,
for
вы
the
все умрете
correction.
на этой войне.
There's very
Шансов
little
на
to
победу у вас
laugh
нет
at, so
никаких.
the humor is out of the way, and I need
Умерший в тюрьме, привлек к себе
about,
больше внимания, больше жалости, больше сочувствия ко всему
Israel and Gaza and also Ukraine. I want to start with Ukraine. I want your comments on the French president. I won't characterize them. Let you watch what he said, and then you can tell me if you think this is crazy or profound. President Emmanuel Macron, 2 days ago.
И я сейчас обращаюсь к каждому украинскому мужчине, который смотрит мир. Всем вашим блогерам, которые героически пишут из Киева свои посты.
All those young Ukrainian politicians who sit in the Rada passing laws after
Всем политикам, которые братья издают закон за законом.
Nothing should be ruled out. And secondly, it's suggesting that French troops maybe they're in an unofficial capacity.
I think the man is certifiable. Let's get that straight. He's talking about effectively declaring war on Russia, and that's what people don't seem to understand. You said conventional military formations into Western Ukraine. You're going to end up in war with Russia. I think President Putin has made that.
Hello, my friends. Not surprisingly here, confirmation, and the confirmation comes from none other than a weasel, which is Olaf Scholz, and he is British soldiers in Ukraine helping fire missiles. Olaf Scholz idiot reveals. Now, it's good to have a weasel and a coward in a position of power if you control that person. Because that weasel will do your bidding. So we'll help you. You know, in the weak people, weak person, is gonna follow your orders. You're going to know there, you open the doors, you push them forward, you push everybody around, he's gonna be where he's at. He's gonna follow your orders. Big little and that is the weasel. It's coward. Coward people will just abandon immediately. Big idiot. So to rebuild more or less, or at least confirmed it. Why? Because I think he is scared. I think he got pushed in the corner by his previous counterpart in Great Britain and friends, because he says that defending the decision not to send Taurus missiles, long-range missiles to Russia. So I think there's a lot of pressure on this idiot. And now he says, you know what? I'll tell on you, and he did. That's how weak people do.
И вообще неограниченное количество снарядов. Тренировали ваши войска. Хорошие умножи. Еще миллиард долларов будет дадут снова. Сотни танков. Сотни бронебойных машин. Тысячи единиц артиллерии. Миллионы снарядов.
I claim that this idiot is so scared, is so cornered by the masters that he doesn't want to destroy Germany again, like in 1945 and 1918. So that's why he says no, no, no. And right now he defends himself by saying, no, actually we don't want to do exactly what the French and the British are doing. Howard was cornered. Here it is. British soldiers in Ukraine helping fire missiles for like 5 hours ago. Yes, that's you. That's the guy. Germany was accused of a flagrant abuse of intelligence after revealing that British soldiers are supporting Ukraine launching long-range foreign attacks. Didn't we know that? After a pattern, we might start trusting the bad and with almost everything that they say. Right now, it's fine.